Most people don't know what proper breathing is. So just because we have air traveling through our bodies does not mean we're breathing properly. And this has so much to do with diaphragmatic breath. The diaphragm is oftentimes referred to as the second heart. Something magical that takes place when you're lying the body down, it's still and it's safe. And then you get to breathing in a way. And this is where we actually do manually, consciously overbreathe, putting our body into a sympathetic state while it's safe. So it has an opportunity to process all these sympathetic emotions that got stuck in the nervous system, that are affecting different organs, that are affecting our psychology, our whole entire operative system of the psyche in an unconscious way.
Drop in,
unwind,
and recalibrate
as we shift your mentality and your reality.
Let's elevate alongside one another as we keep the vibes high
And we keep the consciousness ever evolving in this collective of high vibrational frequencies.
Welcome to the High Vibe Collective podcast. We're your hosts,
Aaron
and Stephanie. Welcome back. Thanks so much for being here. I'm your host, Stephanie, and we have Marcus VanLiere, one of High Vibe Collective's practitioners in Breathwork. And so do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do, Marcus?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a breathwork guide. I facilitate breathwork journeys, one-on-ones, smaller groups, or bigger groups, private ceremonies for retreats. Also an advocate of promoting proper breathing, breath education, and all that comes with it.
Proper breathing. Mm-hmm. What is that?
Yeah, most people don't know what proper breathing is. So just because we have air traveling through our bodies does not mean we're breathing properly. And this has so much to do with diaphragmatic breath. The diaphragm is oftentimes referred to as the second heart, as it has a pulse, it has a rhythm, if it's being used.
Wow.
Because many people are breathing through their mouth into the upper lobes of the lungs where the panic receptors are, and this induces anxiety and has a cascading effect, as you can imagine, whereas the lower lobes of the lungs is where the calming receptors are, and breathing into the diaphragm actually expands air into these calming receptors, which leads to a clearer state and ultimately leading to better decisions, a healthier lifestyle, more inner peace.
Whoa. And everything you just said could be considered quite mind-blowing for some of us, because I remember when I met you, even, like kind of the thought of mouth breathing and all of this stuff, it's just really an easy concept. Mm-hmm. And yet here we are in our society. When I did caregiving for my grandma, I was like, hey, did you know your mouth is actually just for eating out of? Mm-hmm. And she was like, what do you mean?
Yeah, what do you mean? Many
what do you mean I breathe out of it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's a big difference between breathing through the nose and breathing through the mouth.
Mm-hmm.
This episode is brought to you by Scenic Sedona Tours, the perfect Sedona tour. See Sedona in the comfortable open-air vans with overhead canopies for shade in a fully narrated tour. Experience multiple vortex sites, learn about Sedona's geology and history, and even about the legends that have made Sedona famous. Ranked number 1 on TripAdvisor, you can also tour the Grand Canyon. All tours depart from the Dragon's Den, Sedona's hip, crystal, metaphysical gift and clothing store.
There are many benefits that you get by breathing through the nose on a regular basis. It is warmed, humidified, and filtered. It's warmed to the proper temperature by the time it spreads throughout the respiratory system. And if you've breathed through your mouth for an extended period of time and are aware of this, you will quickly notice that you're actually becoming very dehydrated. So all the benefits that actually come from breathing in and out of the nose, and the benefits are many. You get none of those benefits breathing through the mouth.
Well, even the first thing that I go to is proper posture. So I could imagine that if I'm breathing out of my mouth, I could have maybe a tendency to have even some issues with my teeth, as well as maybe just a protruding head. I don't know.
Yeah, you're spot on, actually.
Right.
It sounds like you've studied a little bit, in fact, or your intuition is strong. So, yeah, Weston A. Price is a dentist, earlier 20th century, and a lot of his work has been covered up. A lot of people have dug into it and found it, and more dentists are actually catching on to his work and how the profundity of it, because he discovered the main cause of braces and crooked teeth and cavities is actually mouth breathing, because of oxidization, shrinkage of the airways from regular mouth breathing. Actually, that shrinkage of the airways starts to move into the jaw and shrinks the mouth.
Wow.
And creates crooked teeth. So braces have their place, certainly, somebody needs braces, but this actually comes from, it's quite unnatural to have crooked teeth, and it all really stems from improper breathing. It's the very main cause of it, even more so than sugar.
Crazy. It's a crazy bit of knowledge that can impact anyone, because technically this is really free to implement. You just work to close your mouth and breathe through your nose. And you actually have shared you've implemented mouth tape, right?
Yeah.
Can you share a bit about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, mouth tape. I've been doing it for a couple of years now, and it's definitely gaining popularity. Really, all you need is 3M micropore tape. You can get at Walgreens or any drugstore, and you just tape it over the center of your lips, so you can still breathe out of the corner of your lips while you're sleeping. But what this does is help to induce deeper REM sleep, because sleep apnea is actually caused by mouth breathing, dry mouth, snoring, and sleep apnea. Sleep apnea also has a very, very negative cascading effect of health issues. Many health issues come from sleep apnea, and many people are unaware that they're actually in a state of apnea while they're sleeping. Right,
which is lack of oxygen. Yeah.
It's actually, so sleep apnea is actually over oxygenation. It's over breathing. So that's another thing with mouth breathing. The real pandemic, the real epidemic is actually mouth breathing. And it just leads to so many issues. So, as we fall asleep, if we're sleeping with our mouth open, we're taking in far too much oxygen. We're drying out our mouth, of course. We wake up with bad breath, and it's a great way for bacteria to spread throughout the mouth and into the stomach. So it's the over breathing that actually induces, our body actually uses the innate intelligence to stop breathing, to allow carbon dioxide levels to build back up, because we're over breathing, over oxygenating during sleep. So our body stops breathing so that carbon dioxide can build up, because properly oxygenating the body, funny enough, paradoxically, has far more to do with carbon dioxide than it does with oxygen.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so when we're in an unconscious state of sleep, there are actually benefits of breath holding in a state of apnea while we're awake, while we're doing certain breathing exercises, pranayama, Wim Hof method. You actually use in apnea, and it's very beneficial because it allows that carbon dioxide to build, and many benefits follow that. But it's a problem when we're in an unconscious state of sleep, which leads to heart arrhythmia, palpitations, and, as you can imagine, another negative cascading effect follows that, which leads to all sorts of health issues in digestion, our joints, our neurology, and our waking state. So sleep apnea is very, very detrimental for our health, and sleep tape can help to improve your health without even really doing anything. Just simply taping the center of your lips while you sleep. You'll wake up clear, especially with prolonged use of this method of it has such positive effects, and you will notice a difference. Maybe not at first. And at first, at least when I started, I'd wake up with the tape ripped off, but you get used to it, and you will definitely not want to go back after that.
Do you find that you're able to sleep now without it, or do you still use it?
Yeah, I definitely still use it. There are nights I honestly get a little lazy, but I even, I think just like anything, the body learns with muscle memory. It's, in essence, it's a practice. And the more we are used to sleeping with our mouth shut, our body gets the hint and actually enjoys the benefits. So even when I don't sleep with it, I mean, you can really tell in the taste of your mouth when you wake up. If you wake up with a bad taste in your mouth, you've been mouth breathing probably on and off, if not all night. So yeah, if you wake up and your mouth doesn't taste like morning breath, then hip hip hooray, you've been sleeping with your mouth shut all night.
Hilarious. Yeah. The first thing that comes to my mind, because, and I probably have experienced this, maybe I'm just feeling it for others who might be thinking this through, is almost like this anxiety that would happen in thought of not having enough breath, right? So it's interesting that you say that apnea is over-oxygenation, because it feels like we have the tendency to have that going on more frequently. And then my thoughts, when you tape my mouth shut, I'm thinking like, I'm not getting enough air even. And then, even for myself in heightened states, when I am working to regulate my breath, closing my mouth, breathing through my nose, it is an interesting feeling trying to navigate, okay, am I actually breathing into these lower areas, right? Belly breath, or these lower lobes, because oftentimes I might not be. And in those times, that's where I would probably rip the tape off, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. I'm going to die.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that sensation of not having enough breath, the fear of, if I tape my mouth, I don't know if I would have enough breath. But the breath is paradoxical in many ways. They've actually found the naked mole rat is the longest living rodent, and the naked mole rat lives underground, where it's a very low oxygenated environment. But not only that, it breathes very, very, very slowly in comparison to other rodents. So there have been naked mole rats that have lived over 30 years, which is an extremely long time for a rodent. And this has so much to do with their pace of breath. So if you breathe less, you will actually live longer, because breathing through the mouth will begin to oxidate our cells on a molecular level, which of course in turn leads to faster rate of aging.
Yeah.
So less breath is actually highly beneficial, funny enough.
Wow. Yeah. And I believe then too that if you're working to regulate that just in a conscious way, right? The mouth tape is a great hack. But having that be regulated, then I can imagine just shifting your whole existence. So you're mentioning even that this can help with anxiety. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if anyone who has regular anxiety, more than likely, most of the time, they're breathing in and out of their mouth. And so what was the second part of the first part of your question?
Oh man, just
the how it would shift your reality. So yeah, if somebody is breathing through their mouth often, if somebody has anxiety, oftentimes you can notice that most of the time they're probably breathing incorrectly. They're breathing through their mouth. They're activating these panic receptors. And so if that person for the next year train themselves to breathe only through their nose, inhaling and exhaling through their nose, at least the majority of the time, there are going to be times where you let out a little air or catch yourself breathing through your mouth. And also when you're speaking and you're eating and singing and laughing, I mean, you're going to be breathing through your mouth a little bit here and there. But that person's neurology over the next year, if they train themselves to breathe only through their nose is going to be far, far different than if they were to continue mouth breathing. It's going to be far more enhanced. Their corpus callosum, which is what binds the two hemispheres of the brain, is actually going to grow stronger. So the two hemispheres of the brain will actually work in a more coherent fashion.
Wow. It's crazy. So there's a lot of us in this world who deal with anxiety on the regular. I feel like it's, you know, you mentioned like the pandemic, right? If there is like something that's really taking us over, it feels like this lack of ability to control our own inner feelings. And this is a way that you're saying is within all of us that we can actually just kind of re-tap into to remember, you know, almost who we are in a sense, instead of just this scattered searching in the reality.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have so much power. It's like, you know, the power of nasal breathing. And again, the nose is a use it or lose it organ. And so the more we mouth breathe, the more we're going to lose the ability to breathe through the nose. A lot of people say, well, it's hard for me to breathe through the nose. Well, it's hard for someone to lift weights that never lifts weights. It's hard for someone to feel flexible if they're never stretching. It's going to be hard for somebody to breathe through their nose if they're not using their nose to breathe. And again, breathing through the nose expands that diaphragm. It promotes a diaphragmatic breath, which expands air into these lower lobes of the lungs where the calming receptors are. And if you're breathing into the calming receptors, you know, you're not sending a panic signal to the amygdala in the brain, which is the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn center of the brain. And with these panic receptors through mouth breathing constantly being overused, overactivated, then you're going to have an overactive amygdala and you're going to live in a state of fear. And your life is going to be filled with illusions of fear. So the power of using your breath, training yourself to use your nose, breathe deeper into the diaphragm, even lower into the lower abdomen, and imagining it breathing into the hips even, you will operate from a more grounded state with a clearer mind. And the answer's right under our nose.
I want you, if you can, to elaborate just a little bit more, because you said this phrase, freeze or fawn. And that's something I remember in my evolutionary journey. When I heard that phrase, it really hit me, because we often hear of fight or flight. And that's something, you know, innately, especially those of us who might have grown up in any kind of like, you know, traumatic childhood, we understand fight or flight very readily. But this freeze or fawn, I felt in my adult life, this was something I was exhibiting a lot in relationships, and I couldn't necessarily put my finger on it. And it feels like if that can be brought to awareness a little bit more, you know, maybe some people can relate. So what behaviors would someone be giving if they're like in this fawn state?
Yeah, just folding, hiding, closing their throat. That energy center is very, very stifled if we have an overactive amygdala. An overactive amygdala can look like fight or flight or freeze or fawn. And the fighting version of this would be maybe a throat chakra that's a little too much,
Shouting,
too far open.
Yelling,
Yeah.
right? Being super loud, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so just the freeze or fawn state could come from hyperventilating and literally wanting to hide, and not knowing what to do, not feeling strong enough to handle this situation, because their sense of personal empowerment was probably ridiculed. They were criticized a lot as a child, and they shouldn't speak up. They shouldn't fight back. Not that we should ever really fight, but sometimes we just got to stand up for ourselves and use that. Yeah. And in a sense, fight, and that freeze and fawn is, like you said, it's left out a lot. We're very, very familiar with the fight or flight, but the freeze or fawn is something that has a lot to do with, I would say, the solar plexus, personal empowerment, and the throat.
And where's the solar plexus for those who don't know?
For those who don't know, the solar plexus is the upper abdomen, just beneath the heart.
Yeah.
And, there are more and more people who are becoming aware of chakras. It's not just a yogic term anymore. Call them energy centers, what have you. They're a plexus of nerve endings that exists in different parts of our body, from all the way our pelvic floor, our lower abdomen, our upper abdomen, center of our chest, throat, and back of the head, middle of the head, and even beyond the physical body. I mean, we have much more than 7 or 8 energy centers in the body, but these are actual nerve plexuses that meet, and it's essentially a conjunction of nerve endings. So they store information, and if they're storing information, our subconscious and our nervous system is recording everything since the moment we're birthed in this world, throughout our upbringing, our relationship with parents and siblings and friends and teachers, and all these minor traumas and major traumas take place. They get stored in certain energy centers. And these energy centers begin to operate with this information that has been recorded and stored within them.
Yeah. So it makes complete sense then that if I'm having an underactive area because I'm not even maybe willing or able to, with whatever I've experienced, really breathe into that in a way that's meant for my body as this being in this skin suit, then it makes sense to me then that I would either have this fight or flight or this freeze or fawn, because those nerve endings aren't even getting activated. That diaphragm isn't even really doing its job, right? Because I've got this thing I'm not using. So it's like use it or lose it concept then, and people are losing it, like losing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really just comes down to giving our attention, energy flows where attention goes. Where attention goes, energy flows. And by giving our different energy centers more attention, whether that be certain types of breathing or physical exercise, yoga, many different yoga poses offer more life, more attention, more energy into certain energy centers. And we give these energy centers more attention, more energy, more life. They start to operate in a more aligned fashion.
Yeah, where energy goes.
Where attention goes,
energy flows. Totally, yeah. And many of you may not know, but years ago, I think it was 11 years ago, I was improperly diagnosed with manic depressive disorder, and I had panic attacks quite often. And I know many struggle with that. And in that inward journey for myself on, oh my gosh, how can my body just not be in control? How can I just not be in control of my body? There was a lot that I found myself moving through, and, this common theme of like, those who experience anxiety attacks often feel like they don't have any control. And this is happening, and they're just like succumbing to the reality that they're in this now. And I remember moving through that on the other side, reflecting to a few young women about, oh, no, we are always in control, And so in that, finding the breath was probably one of the first things that really helped me to understand that I actually was in control of this thing that was happening to me, because it's not happening to us. And in that reality of like, wow, I can find safety in my body because I'm here now. And in that I can find my breath. I can always find my breath. And if I can't find my breath, shift and then find it. Shift and then find it. Shift, if that means you got to be on the floor in the fetal position, or outside in the sun, or in a dark closet, or whatever. Just find it so that you can find yourself. And I feel, that piece of anxiety is like where attention goes, energy flows. We always have control. So especially if we're feeling like I don't have control, and we're saying that to ourselves, like I'm a victim to panic attacks, that's attention, that the energy is flowing that way. where we can really kind of shift the script a little bit to empower you a little bit more, to really understand that this ability to regulate is already within you. You've been given all of the pieces. And just like Marcus said, if you can't breathe very readily through your nose, there's all different reasons these days why people can't, right? Deviated septums, all the things. It's like you said, a use it or lose it thing. So just start small. If you go do leg day at the gym and it's your first leg day, go easy.
Yeah. It takes time to recondition the body. And I can relate to having anxiety attacks, panic attacks, and there wasn't anything in particular. My body started feeling like I couldn't catch my breath. I would feel a bit of numbness, and it would strike me at the most random times, but ultimately it was a gift, because what led me to come to the conclusion, I need to learn how to breathe, because there's something with my breath, and I'm getting this anxiety, and I'm having racing thoughts about it. What's triggering it? Is the racing thoughts? Is that what's triggering the anxiety? Is the anxiety triggering the racing thoughts? Whatever it was, I just knew that I had to learn how to breathe. And so I gained an interest in yoga, and then I developed a yoga practice. I was very committed to yoga for 4 or 5 years. And with my practice of yoga, I then was led to different books, and I was just so curious about the breath and the power of it. And when it comes to regulating our state, if we have anxiety, generally anxiety is due to the dread or the worry of the future. Depression is generally relating to the regret of the past. But the breath is never in the future, and the breath is never in the past. The breath is always here and now. It's that constant anchor to ground you into your body, which brings a sense of safety. And if we're worrying, we're anxious, we're depressed, it all comes down to safety, to feeling safe in the body. If we don't feel safe in the body, then we're going to be in a state freaking out, not knowing what we're doing. Our state of mentality is not going to be clear. But the breath is always here and now, and it can always connect us into the moment of now. And by deepening the breath, we deepen our state of awareness and become more conscious of our behaviors. Because when we're following the breath, when we're tuned into the breath, we're not looping. We might still have thoughts that are looping, but if you're following the breath, then you're disidentified with the thoughts that are happening, because you're actually focusing on the force of life that's moving through your body.
Yeah, because there is a force of life moving through our body. We forget this.
Yeah, and who's breathing you? You ever thought about that?
No.
Because you can focus your attention on your breath, and you can manage your breath. You can, to a degree, of course, you can control your breath. But as we're having this conversation, or you're doing your chores around the house, running errands, or whatever it is that, you're just in the present moment, you're not controlling your breath. Who's breathing you?
A lot of us, that would be no one, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Right.
So it's just that innate force of life, that's an intelligent force of life, which is the breath. We can go weeks, even a month without food. Many people have done this with proper hydration, of course, and we can go days without water, but minutes without breath, and we're done. And most people are so caught up in what type of diet they need to be eating and the quality of water they're drinking. And these are very, very important aspects of our lifestyle, of course, but very, very few people are ever thinking about their breath. Very, very little people are actually aware of their breath, their quality of breath, the quality of air they're breathing, but also the rhythm of their breath and the steadiness of the breath. A steady breath leads to a steady life. Long breath leads to long life.
And there's a lot of people who maybe can't do anything about the quality of air that they're breathing, for example. So we have, family down in Phoenix, and they come up often here to Sedona, and all they talk about the whole time that they're here is like, oh my gosh, the air. The air is just so good to breathe. And I've been here so long that I don't even realize that that's a factor, right? And it's such a factor. There's so much going on with that.
Yeah. And that really comes down to collective awareness. You know, we just have to change a lot in terms of how humans have evolved. We've devolved in many ways. You know, there's just a lot of pollution in the water, in the air, noise pollution. You know, that's just, if you live in a city, the quality of air, no one person can change that. It just comes down to collective action and figuring out cleaner ways of living.
Totally correct.
But plants in your house, snake plants especially, are very, very good for air quality.
This episode is brought to you by Scenic Sedona Tours, the perfect Sedona tour. See Sedona in the comfortable open-air vans with overhead canopies for shade in a fully narrated tour. Experience multiple vortex sites, learn about Sedona's geology and history, and even about the legends that have made Sedona famous. Ranked number 1 on TripAdvisor, you can also tour the Grand Canyon. All tours depart from the Dragon's Den, Sedona's hip crystal, metaphysical gift, and clothing store. You'll find local gems, authentic clothing, handmade goodies, and awe-inspiring crystals at all price points. Now, I love this store, and the energy in here is just amazing. So feel free to pick out an unforgettable gift for a loved one, or just treat yourself. Clothes, crystals, oracle cards, good vibes, and more. So if you're looking for the go-to tour of Sedona and you want to kick back and relax and see Sedona the easy way, I highly suggest Scenic Sedona Tours and, of course, stopping into the Dragon's Den to freshen up your vibe.
You know, a lot of the guests who come to us here at the High Vibe Collective in Sedona for retreats are coming for so many different areas of really needing realignment in their life, or wanting to rediscover their purpose, or you know, they're just going through it. Either they've lost a loved one or have experienced some extreme trauma and are just looking for relief. And a lot of people don't even know about breathwork. And I have the pleasure to guide them to someone like yourself, Marcus, where, you know, they don't even know what's coming. They don't even have any idea. I'm like, oh, breathwork, have you done breathwork? They're like, yeah, I've done some breathing practices. But it's very different than what it is you offer in this more emotional release breathwork setting. So I'd love to just have you share a little bit about what that even entails for those who really have no idea.
Yeah. Many people that I work with are unaware of what breathwork is. They don't really know. I get that a lot. Yeah, I've done some breathing exercises. Well, I've done yoga, and of course those are very, very great, and I condone them 100%. So many ways we can use the breath to regulate our system, but I'm always very clear this is not a breathing class. This is not a workshop. This is a sacred ceremony. The emotional release breath work of any type, shamanic breath work, many different brands and types of breath work are out there, but in essence, it's emotional release. It's untying so much of what has been tied up in the nervous system, whether it's grief, sadness, traumas, major traumas, minor traumas, and trauma can happen from a child not getting what they need growing up. Trauma can occur from an argument with a sibling, a loved one, whatever it may be. Trauma is trauma, and so many of these emotions don't get fully processed. And what is emotion? Emotion is energy in motion, and if that energy is not in motion, then it gets stuck. It gets stuck in the nervous system, and there's a beautiful something magical that takes place when you're lying the body down. It's still and it's safe, and then you get to breathing in a way, and this is where we actually do manually, consciously overbreathe, putting our body into a sympathetic state while it's safe, so it has an opportunity to process all these sympathetic emotions that got stuck in the nervous system, that are affecting different organs, that are affecting our psychology, our whole entire operative system of the psyche in an unconscious way. And any type of systematic movement that is to be effective and sustainable has to be from the bottom up. A top-down movement will not be sustained. So with breath work, you work from the bottom up. You work from the body up into the brain. And this has a way of clearing so much pent-up energy in the body and finally putting that energy into motion to clear the mind, to release, to let go, to feel the grief that is there, to feel the sadness that is there, to feel the suppressed joy that is there, the frustration, the anger, whatever it may be that's locked up in the body. Breath work in this type of breath work has a way of just unlocking all that stuff, to be able to let it go and for it to be processed. And so you can live life in a more peaceful, coherent way.
Yeah. And a lot of our High Vibe Collective retreat guests who come and have this experience, they're walking out, they look like different people. Some of them look like 2 to 10 years younger, just this sense of peace on their face and like almost like resolve, like, wow. And after just one session.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that you might witness from your viewpoint while this is happening, just so people can have an understanding of like, you know, maybe not being afraid of what their body might do.
Yeah, some of the things that I witness and see that takes place in these sessions is a lot of times they'll come into a session and they'll be bright and happy and curious, and then we begin the session after talking to see where they're at in life and what's been going on currently, what has taken place in their past. But they walk in a pretty good mood, and then we get the session going, and as they start breathing, all this energy starts to move, all these emotions come up to the surface, and a lot of grief, a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, all these emotions, you know, men crying because males, you know, we got to be tough, we're not supposed to cry, but it actually takes an immense amount of strength for a man to cry. It really comes down to vulnerability, and vulnerability is strength, and strength is vulnerability. And every time we suppress a cry, it actually weakens and stiffens the nervous system. A lot of females will have a lot of pent up rage because women shouldn't express their anger. So these are all common things that I see, but a lot of grief, a lot of frustration, and a lot of anger, but a lot of laughter also. There's so much bliss and inspiration and relief that comes through by the end of the session, and it leaves them in a lighter, brighter state. And if we have pent up emotions in our bodies for a decade or more, it's going to cause aging at a much more rapid rate than if that stuff were let go of. So I see a lot of deep emotional releases, and on the other side of that, it's always joy, the joy of that inner child, that innocence, the happiness, the curiosity to discover more of life and more of who we are as individuals. And so when all that pent up energy is cleared, there's something miraculous that takes place. That person is literally operating in a changed body. And in a changed body, you're going to experience a changed reality.
Yeah. I can't help but just sit over here and smile as you're talking about that joy, because I've experienced it. I've been in that kind of breathwork container with you in several different instances, and it's a journey. And so for those who may be thinking about this and be maybe experiencing like a little bit of fear or even anxiety, just thinking about like, whoa, cool, this would be something I would really love to do, but I'm a little afraid of what I might do. I always encourage people, listen, like this is a completely safe container. All of our practitioners are extremely well trained as to how to handle anything that your body might want to do. So just let it. just give yourself full permission to be and do whatever comes up, because there's probably nothing you haven't seen.
Nothing I haven't seen. Yeah. Really, I mean, anywhere from shaking, contorting a little bit. I've seen 2 people almost vomit. I wouldn't say quite vomit, but gagging and spitting up. And
Having things come up.
Absolutely, literally having things come up from the past, and it's more coughing, in that sense, which the lungs are associated with grief. According to Louise Hay's work, if the listeners here are familiar with Louise Hay's. So, I mean, I've seen so many beautiful, the most miraculous changes come when one has an open enough mind and heart to just go there with themselves. We all have different relationship to our emotions, of course, but the ones who really, really go there and let this stuff go, that's where the miracles happen. And it takes a high sense of courage to be in that vulnerable state and to let it all go. And there are so many people who have experienced this just by the sheer willingness to show up for themselves, whether they were scared or apprehensive at the beginning, talking to me explaining the breath work and being worried about what is going to come out. Some people are actually very curious and excited and not afraid to go there. Either way, what matters is just to show up, just get the body breathing, and to not judge yourself. So much of it has to do with permission, giving yourself permission to really, really go there, to uncover what has been stuffed up in the system.
Yeah, talk about resistance. I remember, first meeting you when you first came to Sedona, and you were like, oh yeah, breathwork would be really great for you. And I was like, for sure. And I mean, I had so much resistance to it and so much fear, really, like that fawn response, like just run and hide. And it's what I say to people is it's the work. It's the good work, because we can sit here all day long and we can, go to our job and we can come home and we can de-stress and we can veg out at Netflix and we can, try to have some time with our partners or try to have some time with our kids, and we can just keep going with that over and over and over again. But if we're willing to do the work, the inner work, then we can really see things manifest quicker in our lives, because you're clearing. I mean, the clarity that comes after something so powerful as this ability to drop in and release within your body with a guided facilitator who knows exactly what to do. You're very intuitive by nature, of course. And so it's almost like, I remember even like being like, oh my God, like, please someone just like ground me in. And then all of a sudden, like your hand would be on my head and I'd be like, oh, thank God, I'm not alone, know? And it's powerful moving through that.
Yeah, there is a funny resistance with breathwork, which I've really had to learn to understand. When I had my first breathwork experience, it cracked me open so much, and I was just flooded with inspiration. I mean, it left such a deep imprint on me, and I got so high on my own breath. I got high on my own supply, and I was just hooked. And I knew it was, I wouldn't say I was addicted to it, but I was just, I was blown away. And every Sunday morning I would go to these breathwork journeys, and I just couldn't wait all weekend. I just couldn't wait till Sunday morning. And although breathwork is becoming very, very popular, it's rapidly growing all over the earth because of how effective it is and the sustainable changes it leads to. I've had to come to this understanding that people actually resist breath work. And a key word to breath work is work. You are your own healer in this practice, in this modality. It's not just sitting on a table and receiving some sort of healing. This is you doing the work. And I think that's where a lot of the resistance comes from. And I think it's also resistance to feeling fully alive, to feeling those deep feelings even though they're hard to feel, to truly feel them is to feel all of life, because we can't move through life just wanting to experience joy and happiness all the time. That's our preferred state, no matter who we are. Even if we're unconsciously choosing and cycling through these states of victimhood, fear, sadness, whatever it may be, we all prefer joy. But so much of the human experience has to do with feeling fully alive, and feeling fully alive also means feeling those feelings that are hard to feel.
Mm-hmm. And you said a key word earlier, willing.
Mm-hmm. Willingness.
Yeah. We can do anything if we're willing.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to even know what it looks like on the other side. Just being willing and able and just showing up for it, right? Because those resistances are always going to be there. And sometimes they're so subconscious you don't even know it, right? It's like showing interest in something and then not putting it on your calendar and forgetting about it. That's a form of resistance in ways, right?
Yeah.
It's our own self-sabotaging nature. And it's really interesting to me that you said it's almost like we have a fear of being fully alive and fully living and living to this, if it is us that's in control and we are creating our reality, then how come I don't have what I want? Right? And that was something that had me stuck for a really long time in my journey. Right? And it's letting that go and really being open and clear to let it come out of you and then move through you so something better can come in its place.
Yeah, absolutely. It really, really comes down to willingness. And a metaphor I oftentimes like to share with people who I work with, a very powerful metaphor, some may be familiar with this, is the bison. The bison will actually, if a thunderstorm is rolling in, they will gather in a herd and they will charge directly into the thunderstorm, because they know that if they go into the thunderstorm, if they just move into the storm, they're going to get to the other side of the storm where it's lighter, brighter, and clearer much, much quicker. Whereas cattle will gather in a herd and they will run away from the storm, or at least do their very best. But as you can imagine, they get caught in the storm and then they're on the storm's terms and they're stuck from trying to run away. You're not going to outrun the storm. The storm's coming either way. So especially with breath work, but this goes hand in hand with any type of inner work, that if you just move into the storm, you'll get to the other side. Just trust the process. You'll get to the other side where you're in a better state. And if you're in a better state, you're in a level of enhanced energy. And if you're in a level of enhanced energy, you're going to experience an enhanced reality.
Yeah. And what's so beautiful, because oftentimes I'm the one orchestrating, the series of events that our clients are going to have, or guests are going to have here in their retreat experience here in Sedona. So I'll line them up with a breathwork ceremony with you, and then right afterwards have a craniosacral session later in the day or something like that, so that their bodies can just really drop into a peaceful state and allow almost that integration within the body, or some type of really relaxing body work. Because I do think, and you've mentioned this a few different times, we're more than just our spirit. We're more than just the skin and bones. We're all of it all together. So if we're not looking at every piece, then we're only looking at one piece of the puzzle. But I love how you said the breath really comes almost to this culminating center point of how we can regulate our humanness.
Yeah, the breath is key for that, because the body is a learning device for the mind. And if we use the primary force of life that is constantly sustaining our life, that we can only go minutes without, otherwise we're toast. If we truly anchor into that and learn the wisdom that the breath actually has to offer, because the more in touch you become with your breath, you start to develop a relationship with your breath. This microcosmically will translate to the wisdom of the macrocosm creation. again, the body is a learning device for the mind. So if we use that primary source of life constantly sustaining us, this will teach our mind a lot of things on how energy and life and creation actually operates.
Yeah. One thing that I feel called to share that I learned from this really incredible midwife throughout my pregnancy, because I was like, oh dear God, how do we, raise a child and also not mess it up, right? Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of people are like that right now. We're coming into this like dawn of awareness and awakening. And so some of us who did come even from like just the mildest amount of childhood trauma, we're trying to not do that again. And one thing that she said was really that it can change in just one generation. So if just our children were raised in this way, if we just all consciously chose this way of being, then it would change. It wouldn't take decades and centuries. It would just take one generation to clear it and heal it, because it is stored in our body, and it's generationally stored in our body. Even what you were saying about the jaw, that's a generational thing. And this midwife also shared about that, because it's generations and generations and generations of mouth breathers are gonna create a young child who has the symptoms of it, right? So, but if we don't know what that looks like, we can fix it. We can fix it here and now, and feel empowered to do that.
Yeah, and it actually in turn has a ripple effect, because this has a lot to do with mirror neurons. These neurons are, if you're with a certain community doing certain things, you really can't help but start to do similar things. This any type of animal has these neurons. Like a wolf pack, they're all going to have their own unique traits, characteristics, personalities, just as we humans do. But these mirror neurons start to make changes throughout any type of community. If you're hanging out with people who have really bad toxic habits, you're probably going to have bad toxic habits because of these mirror neurons. And if you're around positive people, those mirror neurons are going to work in the same way. But also in terms of generational healing, as a change is made throughout one generation, it's going to affect other people around them in their life, and then around them, and it's the ripple effect at that point. So yes, it doesn't have to be undone over decades, even though the past 7 lineages throughout the familial lineage, it doesn't have to take 7 or more generations to undo all that. It can be undone in one.
Here and now.
Other people around can be inspired by that and learn consciously or unconsciously from that.
Yeah. Incredible. Incredible. We could talk about this all day.
Absolutely.
And we'll probably do another episode. This
episode 2 is coming.
Yeah. So where can our listeners find you?
Yeah, so I'm located in Sedona, Arizona. I offer private sessions, as well as I do public events as well, and private ceremonies, group ceremonies for retreats. Right now, the best way to reach me is on Instagram, and my Instagram handle is Marcus_VL. That's Marcus with a C, MARCUS_VL.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah. Thanks so much, Marcus. This is so impactful. And if anyone learned anything today, we would love to hear how it impacted you and what you're going to take away from it. And stick around, because we've got a lot more good stuff that we're going to be sharing, and we'll see you next time. Yay. Oh my God.